Welcome into the State of Recruiting podcast, another weekly edition of all things Longhorns recruiting. Got a pretty busy week. Obviously a lot to talk about with Texas football, and it's not just team related. After the loss to Georgia, it's a huge recruiting week with Arkansas in town. The last probably really big recruiting weekend we'll see of the season, and we have a big Top 247 update with the rankings, which if you're following Texas recruits, had a pretty big impact. And Jordan's going to break down kind of where guys maybe moved up and where several guys moved down.
Yeah, we're going to start with Texas commits first, and then we will get into the flip targets they are pursuing. The highest ranked Texas commit, Jermaine Bishop. And by the way, 247 Sports, the industry outlier on Jermaine Bishop. We're the only site that has him as a 5-star. He's rising from the number 26 overall prospect to number 16. I believe still has the athlete projection, could genuinely project to the NFL draft as a cornerback or receiver. And honestly, and he might very well be pound for pound the best player, not only in the state of Texas, the entire country. He's 155, 160 pounds soaking wet. And has pretty much been the best football player on the field, on any field he's played on since he came into the world 17, 18 years ago. His ranking, it's a combo of the long-term developmental projection at corner. He's already a tremendous slot receiver, and I do think slot receiver is what he plays eventually in Austin. But again, could be either one, and is a tremendous player. Not really much more to say that we haven't added there. And I guess last thing, closing in on being in the top 10 in Texas high school football history in receiving yards, receptions, and touchdown receptions. He's already the Houston area's all-time leader in all three of those statistics. So pretty impressive. Diabell, the 5-star quarterback commit, is dropping from number 10 in the country to number 27. A lot of people are probably going to be upset about this, but he has had back-to-back season-ending injuries. Doesn't have the same amount of pass attempts and snaps, overall experience as other players in the class. And, to provide some context of that, out of any of the quarterbacks Texas has landed in the Sark era, whether through high school or the portal, he has the least amount of pass attempts out of all of them. And he's either tied for second lowest starts or is second lowest in starts, despite him being on American Heritage's varsity squad since his 8th grade year. Became the full-time starter as a sophomore, was the full-time starter as a junior and senior, but had a leg injury that ended the junior season and then had a shoulder injury that ended the senior season. So, still a 5-star. The scouting team, they've had a ton of live exposure to him. But, the injuries and other things like that's the drop. But there's still a lot of conviction in him, and they've really liked what they've seen from him in live exposure. There's been a lot of highs in the individual games he's played. The third highest ranked Texas Longhorn commit, Tyler Atkinson, dropping from number 21 in the country to number 38. However, he retains the linebacker 2 tag. Big reason for this, size and positional value. It is really important to bring up the top 247. It basically reflects draft projection for the class 3 to 4 to 5 years down the line. Things that get factored into that. Running backs. Very rarely are they drafted in the first round. Very rarely will there be a 5-star running back. And if there is one, it's usually just one. Height, weight, size, speed, it all factors into this in addition to game tape. And, with the size and other things, positional value there, that causes a drop. Still a really good player. They value him a ton, and he's going to be very successful at Texas and in, his post-collegiate career. But, if Anthony Hill, as good as he is, isn't a surefire lock to be a first-round pick, which he's not, it's kind of hard to project Tyler Atkinson into there. And, when you think about that, it does make some sense. Kosiak Pala, how about that? Katie Maid Creek's finest, rising from an 89 graded 3-star to the number 58 overall prospect in the country, number 9 edge in the country, and the number 8 overall prospect in the state of Texas. Well-deserved. This is a kid who has stayed at Katie Maid Creek all 4 years, despite never playing in the playoffs once, and despite, the large majority of schools in Houston trying to get him to transfer in. The bend is great. The testing data, measurements are great. Very similar body type and testing data what Colin Simmons had. Obviously not quite as explosive. There's Colin Simmons is a one of one. But tremendous senior year, really putting it all together. And I mean, the senior tape is some of the best in the country, if not the Texas recruiting class. And he keeps the edge projection. The plan for him at Texas is to play kind of that Trey Moore, Sam linebacker, edge hybrid role. It's probably what Brad Spence will play next year. But he has the edge projection because if he does get drafted, our scouting team thinks it'll be, more of an edge role that has some linebacker hybrid ability than a linebacker role that has some edge hybrid ability, if that makes sense. But again, great thing for Kosi Akpala, one of our long-term favorite players, favorite kids we've gotten to cover. And I mean, he fully deserves this, fully earned it. Richard Wesley dropping from number 37 to number 80 in the country. And I want to make it clear too, people are going to be upset about the drops. Him going from 37 to 80 in the country, it still means he's going to be a day 2 projection. That's still pretty damn good. He's more of a linear upfield rusher. The reclassification plays a small part in it, but he has played over 40 games, so there is a lot of context and experience with him. A ton of his production is kind of just being bigger, faster, stronger than the high school offensive lineman he's going against. When he goes up against guys at times in the league he plays in, he can get stood up, power and explosion when it's not a huge mismatch for him. Sometimes there's not a game plan there. So, again, very much a great prospect. He's 6'5", 250 pounds with a lot of frame space, a lot of upside, but, dropping a tiny bit in the rankings. Samari Matthews moves up 11 spots, one of the few risers from number 125 to 114. Our scouting team went into the season liking him a lot, and thought he earned the slight bump. The main questions going into the year were, can he translate his camp reps of just bullying kids at the catch point into real football? And he has. Another question was the ball production. When is he going to produce ball production, produce more of it? Well, he's done it as a senior. He has several interceptions. I know he has 1 pick six. I think he might have 2. And he's just had a tremendous senior year. And also want to add, this is a kid that I do think can play and will play as a freshman. I don't know if we'll see quite the snap count Cade Phillips has had in recent weeks, but the snap count he played earlier in the year, if one of the 2026 defensive back signings is going to play a lot year one, it's Samari Matthews. Derek Cooper, one of the bigger drops. He's going from number 41 to 156. Some of it has to do with his tag going from an athlete tag to a running back tag. Honestly, the highest ceiling projection from our scouting team was as athlete or safety, but he's obviously playing running back at Texas. So yeah, really good north-south runner. Doesn't have a ton of wiggle, kind of rigid at times. And as good as he is with verified athleticism, multi-sport data, you kind of want to see more out of the player, compared to the athlete he is. Yeah, and like I said, good size, good speed, good multi-sport data, but it's not really matching up to the athlete. And he needs to get more flexible. Luckily, that's one of the things Texas's strength and conditioning program is really good at. So still a very bright future for him. And I mean, he's still a projected NFL draft pick as a high schooler. Other guys, James Johnson is going from 94 to 170. 247 entered this football season the lowest on him to begin with, remain the lowest on him. He's only played in 3 or 4 games this year. He's not played since mid-September, early September. There's an injury there. When he did play, he was not moving well at all. He had a big knee brace on, and there was not really a clear answer on what that exact injury is. So, yeah, and when he's good, he's great. Really explosive, can get upfield, but there are a lot of question marks here. He has all the tools, all the, measurements. He has arguably the best shot put throw in the entire 2026 class, besides Jackson Cantwell, the Miami commit, who will probably, compete in the Olympics one day, like his parents did. And he has like a +6 wing. So he can very much, outlive his ceiling and live up to the ceiling other sites have him ranked at. But it is a gamble to rank him that high. So that's why he's at where he's at. John Turntine dropping from number 55 to 179, moves from an interior offensive line projection to an offensive tackle projection. John Turntine in his ranking, it's been a point of discussion for Texas fans, the Texas market, for quite some time. And it's because around his sophomore year, he was 300 pounds. It was great as a sophomore. And the interior line tag came about because, hey, he's 6'3.5", 6'4", has long arms, but not super long ones, could play tackle, but probably an easier guard projection, could be a mauler in the run game. But he's now around the 260s, 270s. And I mean, the senior tape run blocking, the run blocking has taken a step back from the junior and sophomore year. A lot of that has to do with weight. So, instead of being this easy kind of projection to guard if tackle doesn't work out, it's now back to tackle because he's not really being the run mauler on senior tape that you'd like out of a guard. And that's why he has the tackle projection. Still has a lot of potential, but he's going to have to add weight at Texas, and he's going to have to be better at the point of attack the rest of his senior campaign in the playoffs and in his career at Texas. Corey Wells moved down 16 spots from 174 to 190. I didn't really get an explanation on that besides just the fact that, hey, when you move someone up, everyone has to move down a spot. It's kind of just how the board shook out. Still, what is that? I think around 6 projection, about something like that.
Sure.
Vonnie Cleveland goes from number 54 to 199. 24/7 is still the highest in the industry on him. As far as the drop goes, he's played 11 games. He doesn't have a sack. Doesn't really have the body control necessary to provide pass rush value as an A gapper. That's what he is. He's an A gapper. And at times, I mean, he can get pushed off the spot by double teams at the high school level. So, again, still the highest on him. A lot of potential and one of the rare A gapper body types. But, that is why the drop happened. The last Texas commit we're going to hit on, Hayward Howard. He is not in the top 247, but he's been bumped up from an 88 graded 3-star to a 91 graded 4-star. He's a 4-star outside the top 247. If the rankings went to 300, he'd be number 263 in the country. And to explain what it means if you are a 4-star outside the top 247, it means we're projecting you to be a priority undrafted free agent. So, right after the draft ends and Mr. Irrelevant's picked, there's usually like an hour-long window where all the top undrafted free agents are getting poached. We think will be in that 1 hour-long window. That's what the unranked 4-star projection means. He's a shade over 6'2", extremely well-versed in hand-to-hand combat at the line of scrimmage, natural cover skills, sticky, reactive as a press man defender, and really, really good as a one-on-one defender. Has a nearly 10-foot broad jump. He's played a tiny bit of snaps at safety as a senior. Is kind of a true defensive back take to where if it doesn't work at corner, he has the tools to make it work at safety. It's still going to be a bit of a longer burn. He's 175. He has to build up play strength, become a better tackler. But, I mean, he's a guy that's already really aggressive, and he can let PK and a defensive coordinator be really aggressive with using him in press man or in cover 2 situations. And, a bit of a longer burn, but probably a year 2, year 3 player when he starts contributing at Texas. Going to go through the flip targets they're looking at real quick. We'll just kind of glance through these. Zion Ely, the 5-star edge rusher out of Baltimore St. Francis, the Maryland commit, who Brian Doan of 247 Sports reported could be taking a visit to Texas. Don't know if anything is finalized fully on the schedule. We're yet to hear that, but there is a chance he could show up in Austin this weekend for the Arkansas game or next weekend for the Texas A&M game. Kind of like what happened with Corey Wells. When you move a guy up, guys are going to have to drop back a spot. Everyone will behind him. But truly like a elite freak show prospect. This guy has the testing data of an elite X receiver. He ran 4.4 in the 40 at 6'3.5", 220. And has an 11-foot broad jump, and the athleticism shows up on tape. He plays to it. So he needs to, get a bit more committed as a true edge setter, but is without question, if he ended up at Texas, would be the best edge prospect they've signed. It's him or Colin Simmons. There's an argument for both. And the reason if Ely was over Colin Simmons, it's because he was much more of a surefire projection to be an edge drafted into the NFL due to size, height, weight. Colin had the testing data, but at the end of the day, he's still, a 6'2.5" edge rusher that is best known for his speed, explosiveness off the edge. One of my favorites one of our favorites here on the State of Recruiting, Big Rich Anderson out of Edna Carr, going from number 64 in the country to number 12. What a rise for Big Rich. Uh, Truly some of the most ridiculous senior tape you'll ever come across. Some of the best, if not the best, in the class thus far. He's 6'4", 350. He plays a lot lighter than that, like he's genuinely 50, 60 pounds lighter. Can get after the QB, has pass rushing production, and like is kind of uniquely gifted as a pursuit defender because he's 6'3", 350, and again does not play like he's 350. His size and width alone like defeats blocks by itself. It's remarkable. It's one of the craziest things you'll see. And the size, width, active power, active play style. Like he's one of the handful of guys, maybe 4 of them each year, that can actually play snaps in the SEC as a true freshman. And he's a full-time A-gapper, now getting the number 1 D-line tag. Lamar Brown is still ranked ahead of him, but Lamar Brown has the athlete tag. And I mean, a tremendous prospect. And we'll talk about the recruitment in a little bit since he is going to be in Austin this weekend. Next on the list of guys they're going after, Bryson Martinez, the LSU commit out of Gonzales, about half an hour away from Baton Rouge. Visited for the Vanderbilt game. He's going to be back on an OV this weekend for the Arkansas game. He is rising from number 114 in the rankings to number 82. This year he's played tight end, receiver, wildcat, and I mean the athleticism he shows is ridiculous. He's one of the highest ceiling offensive tackles in the entire class. Going to need some time. He's going to need development. Going to need, at least 1, if not 2 years to be ready to play, but has legit NFL offensive tackle tools. The balance and flexibility at his size are, unique. That's not something you come across often. And yeah, again, one of the higher ceiling tackles in the country. Jamarian Carlton, he is a Baylor commit that Texas hosted for the Vanderbilt game. Could potentially, flip to the Longhorns if Dave Aranda gets fired, which is possible. Longhorns still only have 1 edge committed in Richard Wesley. They still need another. Our scouting team, they're dropping him from 35 to 158. They've always loved the athlete, but, they've been waiting on it to translate to Fridays for multiple years, and it hasn't. Not as instinctive as some of the other guys in front of him. He does still have the ceiling of where he'd previously been ranked, but the conviction in him living up to that and reaching that ceiling has kind of declined as time has moved on. He doesn't play through contact super well. He can get washed out at the line of scrimmage, and, I mean, he doesn't hold ground tremendously well either. So really like the player still. Great kid too, but he's going to need significant time in a strength and conditioning program. Again, has all the tools, freaky athlete. He can still figure it out. But, we wanted it to click more than it has by now, and it hasn't. And I will say, too, like, again, can still reach the ceiling we had him ranked at. And one thing I mentioned on the board when he visited, he has a shoulder injury he's been playing through as a senior. We don't dock guys just because of injuries, but it is very concerning. Shoulder injuries can really linger. And shoulder injuries are arguably the most important thing for point of attack players on the line of scrimmage. Think about how long Colton Vosic's shoulder injuries have lingered, over the last few years. So, yeah. And then that is pretty much everyone in the rankings update. Also, want to give a quick pat on the back of myself. Carter Buck out of Lake Travis, now in the top 247, the TCU edge commit. I believe he's the highest ranked TCU commit in the Horned Frogs' class. Been banging on the table for him since his sophomore year. Happy he gets the rankings bump. We're the industry outlier on him, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. Texas should have been and should be recruiting this kid. If this kid lived 30 minutes outside of Athens, I guarantee you he'd be committed to Georgia right now. I guarantee it. So yeah, on signing day, I'm gonna have a storylines we can look back on in a few years. It's gonna include stuff like, hey, Felix Ojo. A lot of people were mad at him because he kind of took the biggest offer when Texas Tech has only had 5 offensive tackles drafted in the last 45 years. He's going to be someone we all look at and can be used against or in a positive way for Texas Tech in recruiting by, hey, this is what happened when a 5-star went there. He busted or he still got drafted. So that'll be one of them. Another one of the topics is going to be Carter Buck. Texas didn't recruit this kid. How good does he end up being at TCU? Is he going to be a draft pick? And I mean, Jet Walker, Caden Scherer, Ben Duncombe, other local kids would have been thrown in there too. But now Texas is recruiting Jet Walker, Caden Scherer. So excited for that story. Should be a fun one and an interesting one to look back on in a few years. But hey, the Longhorns, they're back in DKR on Saturday. They got Arkansas coming to town. Bobby Petrino. Maybe he brings his neck brace, maybe not. Texas.
So we're recording this on Wednesday for anyone listening, and there's some breaking news on the SEC coaches call. Sark says, not that, obviously we're not reporting anything about him going anywhere. There's Desmond Howards of the world are lighting Twitter on fire with taking his trash out and just talking. But Sark says he's not going anywhere, and gave a very long statement about how he is staying at Texas. He has 2 kids enrolled at Texas, hopes another one next fall. So yeah, it's interesting. Interesting little statement from Sark on the SEC coaches call. So, I mean, recruiting wise, that doesn't help to have this kind of stuff on Twitter. I just froze up for a second. 2 weeks before National Signing Day, when you're trying to wrap up the class. So Sark addressed that.
And also, I mean, was he ever going to say anything else?
Right.
You know?
But I think to so vehemently come out and say I'm not going anywhere, you could do Lane Kiffin where it's like he's not answering anything, and then his family's touring Baton Rouge and in Gainesville.
Hey, you know who
playoff run?
You know who said they weren't going anywhere?
Who?
Jim Schlossnagle.
Hmm?
Mike Elko. Just saying. Sark has to say that no matter what. I was just saying. But interesting, excited, or not excited, but looking forward to seeing the video clip and how animated he got. Because,
it's the coach's call, so I don't think there's gonna be a video of it. But
oh yeah, good point. But anyways, hey, how about the Longhorns back in DKR for the first time in 3 weeks? And I mean, honestly, probably the best recruiting opportunity for a home game since the Sam Houston game, September 20th, which was the second to last one. Because, Vanderbilt is obviously a much better opponent, much more entertaining game than what the 3 non-conference dud games were. But Vanderbilt was an 11 a.m. kick. Sam Houston was a 7 p.m. kick. Arkansas, it's an afternoon one, makes it a lot easier for players to get in. And also, hey, it's the second round of the Texas high school football playoffs. There are 5, if you make it to the championship, you're in the 6th round. So a lot of kids are done with football, their junior season, their senior season. It's easier to make it to games. But on the flip side, if you're still in the playoffs, you got a pretty good team. And if you got a pretty good team, you probably got pretty good players. So, some players are going to have to miss the game because they're playing in the playoffs. And that's not just in-state kids. For example, Teray Davis, the 3-star athlete / safety Texas is pursuing out of Fairview High School in Boulder, Colorado. He's also a UCLA commit. His playoff game kicks off an hour later after Texas's does on Saturday. So maybe he makes it in for the A&M game. Maybe he doesn't at this point. If they win, he might not be able to make it to A&M next week. So we'll see. But Teray Davis is no longer expected in. We're going to hit on the rest of the visitors that are. Hank, you want to start it off?
Yeah, and I'm apologize if you're watching the video on YouTube. I'm not going to share the profiles as we're talking about it because you can't shoot. What's the expression? I don't know. So just going to see our faces. But yeah, so I'm just going to hit on the big time official visitors, and this is really Texas doesn't like to do official visitors in game or in season during games because part of it is you just don't have a lot of time to spend with them. And that's why, I think we talked about this on the podcast either last week or the week before. It's like Texas, wouldn't have been the worst idea to maybe bring kids in on the bye week for official visits. Just because maybe it's, some teams pre-playoff, some teams, they're still playing playoff games on Friday, so they have Saturdays open. They didn't do that, but maybe going forward, that's something they look at. But Arkansas weekend, they're gonna take a swing. 2 local guys last week they offered last Thursday, so a week ago, if you're listening today, Jet Walker, 3-star running back, and just want to give a props to Jordan, who's noted back in the summer prior to Derek Cooper being committed, and right after KJ Edwards committed to Texas A&M in mid-June, he wrote a story on guys Texas could look at if at the running back position, and Jet Walker was included in there at the time.
It
Was he
feels like feels like a
he,
year ago.
he committed to West Virginia at the time?
He was, because he flipped
Okay,
from West Virginia to Minnesota
in
November
Minnesota.
3rd.
And so, the connection there, obviously being Chad Scott, having known him from his time committed to West Virginia, from Chad Scott's time as a coach at West Virginia, obviously gets the Texas job. Texas pulled the trigger on an offer for him last Thursday night. I went out to his game. Georgetown was playing Centennial on last Friday night. Beat the snot out of him. Didn't see a whole lot of Jet Walker highlights. I think they were, they were using him, but I think at the same time it wasn't a game Georgetown was going to, have trouble winning. It was a 4-6 team they were playing, and so we saw a little bit. He had a goal line touchdown run. He had a 2-point conversion, so did a little bit. Showed that power back ability with his frame. But talked to him after the game. That was, obviously what I wanted to do. Seeing him as well to get his thoughts on the Texas offer, and keep in mind he just committed to Minnesota like 3 weeks ago, or maybe less than that.
Yeah, November 3rd.
Yeah. So it's very clear talking to him, and just by the quote, he said this one hits a little bit different. He's in Georgetown. He's 20 minutes up the road from DKR. His family went to Texas, and he said both his grandparents are great grandparents. Like, he's a Texas guy, and so he said he's still obviously committed to Minnesota. He's a big fan of Minnesota, but he's taking this official visit, and it feels like, just my gauge on this, and I'm sure everyone that covers Texas, it's more of a matter of when, not if. Like, I would expect Jet Walker to be on Texas's commitment list by the end of this weekend. And so, we'll see how this visit goes. And I asked him, are there any other schools, or is it just Texas, Minnesota? And he said it feels like it's a new school calling every day. So I don't know if that means he might take another visit, but he's certainly blown up, and in Texas is getting in on the action there.
Real quick on him, he's one of 3 running backs committed to Minnesota. And quick fun fact on Walker, who, by the way, is eclipsed 5,000 career rushing yards, did it a few weeks ago in the regular season. He spent his sophomore season at Lampasas. Was a freshman at Georgetown, went to Lampasas, balled out. I think had like north of 1,500 yards as a sophomore, was all district in that 4A district, and then moved back to Georgetown. He's been there his junior and senior year. Tremendous high school player, a one-cut back, straight line runner. He'll tell you that too. He knows what it is. But it would bring something to the Texas room they don't have, as a true red zone run behind the pads type of runner. CJ Baxter, at one point was that, but I think, as we all can kind of see, he is probably never going to be the same level of athlete he was pre-knee injury in fall camp last year. And it stinks. I hate it for CJ, but it's reality in Texas. They need a red zone back, and that's what Walker brings to the table. Also of note, could potentially return for the Texas A&M game the following week, or visit somewhere else. Georgetown, they beat the snot out of Burleson Centennial round 1. But round 2, they have Frisco Lone Star coming to town, and Frisco Lone Star, they're favorite to win state, or at least are one of the legitimate programs competing for it. So it'll be a rough matchup for Walker, but maybe seeing the Texas game the next day kind of helps with those feelings if their season ends or whatnot. But the other Georgetown Eagle, Caden
Well, I was
Sherrill.
going to add real quick, and I was talking to some people about Walker, and just a background. Like, so he was committed to West Virginia. He wanted to go to Minnesota to play against a more competitive conference. So Big Ten, he gets an SEC offer. I think that just, if he wants to play in the most competitive conference, I think, Big Ten, you're not going wrong, but I think SEC is obviously SEC. But to just go off what you were saying, another Jet Walker's teammate, guy blocking for him, Caden Sure. Am I saying it right, Jordan? Sure.
I don't know. I've been saying Sure.
Sure.
Caden Sure.
Same night as Jet Walker reported Texas offer, and his was kind of interesting because Jordan was the first to report that he actually set up an official visit for the Arkansas weekend, but he did not yet have an offer. So you typically don't see that, but obviously, the writing's on the wall. If they want to bring you in for an OV, probably understood that they're most likely going to offer you. But Texas went ahead, offered him last Thursday with Jet Walker. Again, saw his game on Friday night. He played obviously a little bit more than Jet did, just because he switches tackle positions. But 6'5.5", 285 pounds, former defensive end, tight end. So, has that innate athleticism that he hasn't lost when putting on the weight. I know Jordan put his stats from the national combine. He's actually like pretty, from a measurables or, combine production standpoint, was first in the broad jump in the 5'10", and I think second in the 40 in the vertical, right?
Yeah, and that's amongst O linemen.
Yeah, amongst our linemen. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah, I just wanted
freak
to clarify.
offensive lineman we've ever seen.
Yeah. Hey, he's a late bloomer, but
Yeah.
the thing I like about him makes me feel better about him as a player and in projection. Look at the schools that were offering him and trying to get him on campus last summer. It's Houston, Texas Tech, Iowa, Wisconsin, Virginia. He's obviously committed to Stanford, Andrew Luck, though it's Stanford and they can't get everyone. They do have a pretty good scouting operation. Like those are all developmental programs, and it's because Caden Scherer is a developmental prospect. Like probably about a year away from being a year away, to be realistic with you. Going to need 2 years, I think, in a SAC program, but has a lot of tools. And I do think is, definitely going to be a guard if he ends up at Texas, like the projection list as an IOL, though he does play left tackle for Georgetown, right?
Yeah, he was switching. I think they do the kind of the Vanderbilt method where they switch sides. Like he was playing left and right. If I was looking at it right,
Yeah.
but no,
And
yeah. I mean, do you think the guard projection though is more just like because you got the athletic? Like, do you think it's like just arm length? Like, what do you or just like what do you think goes into more of a guard projection?
play strength, foot speed, um, and I mean, frame too.
Yeah,
I haven't seen him in person in a while. I think, well, since September actually, because the last time he was on campus was the Sam Houston game. Texas was being sneaky. He never posted anything, and the only reason I know he was there because it's not like sources were going to tell us, just because I was on the field taking photos, and it was like, wait a minute, this kid's a 26 committed to Stanford. This is important. And then he was also on campus last year for the Texas Mississippi State game. I think was Arch's first start in an SEC game. And Jet Walker was also on that visit. So it'll be their second or third time seeing the Longhorns in a game in DKR in the last 2 seasons.
yeah. And so like when I asked him about his offer, obviously he's excited. I think with Stanford, I think for any kid, the degree, the weight of the degree, getting there. But I was told he wants to do business, and obviously the Macomb School of Business is also a very good business school. I don't know how it ranks to Stanford, but certainly one of the best programs in the country. So, if he's truly looking at it from an academic standpoint, and like you said, a couple of years to develop, that would make a lot of sense in a class that Texas, really needs to load up on offensive linemen.
Hey, a
So,
little off topic. There can't be a cost of living on a college football campus higher than Stanford, right? At least in the Power Four.
yeah, I mean, what's I'm thinking
Like
of non-power four schools.
USC or UCLA, maybe.
I mean, maybe Cal Berkeley, which is like the same thing as Stanford in
Yeah,
terms of location.
yeah.
Um,
You
yeah,
want to move on to
yeah,
Bryson Martinez?
yeah. So
Okay,
Bryce
cool.
Martinez, another. You talked about him with the rankings and where he moved up to in the top 247 within the top 100. But interesting one. Again, Texas is clearly intent on bringing in more offensive linemen to load up this class with. And again, I don't think we mentioned Max Wright. I think is supposed to be at SMU still this weekend. So I'm not putting Max.
I need to
Reed
check
down.
in with him on that. They play in like Amarillo or Abilene. Melissa
Oof,
does on Friday
that'd be kind of tough.
or Saturday. So yeah, it might be rough. But hey, Julian Caldwell, we'll talk about in a little.
Yeah,
He plays in West Texas and is driving overnight to make it in time for the Texas Arkansas game. So
good on you, Julian. No, so Bryson Martinez, another Louisiana guy committed to LSU. One of these guys, like Richard Anderson, like has only taken an LSU official visit, and so this will be, I guess, his first official visit since taking that visit. And we'll see what happens. There's been a bunch of LSU buzz with Lane Kiffin this week, and I feel like that coaching search is eventually going to turn into a clown show just with everything involved with that.
Turn into one. It ain't one already.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. So we'll see what happens with that. Again, these kids that live right next to Baton Rouge, does it really matter who the LSU coach is? You never know. But Texas will give it a swing this weekend with Bryson Martinez. Certainly a lot to like about him. Going down the list, 3-star cornerback Josiah Vilmael, former Oklahoma State commit. We've covered this one on Horns 24/7 pretty closely. I don't think there's any secret. If Texas wants to take him, he's going to be in this class. He said Texas is his leader. I would be surprised. Like I said, if they do take him, I would think this is his last visit, if not coming back next week for the A&M game. He said they're for sure the favorite down the stretch. A few other schools, Arizona State, Baylor. I think he canceled one of his. He canceled the Houston visit to come to Texas this week. Houston's filled up at corner, but he was going to have to move a visit anyway.
He has a K-State OV set for Thanksgiving week, but like you said, if he's a take at Texas, probably pulling the trigger this weekend, and that trip to the Little Apple is probably getting canceled.
Yeah, so we'll just watch him closely this weekend. Certainly a guy, with these Georgetown kids, we can put on commitment watch this weekend with signing day just around the corner as well. Last, but in terms of the originally official visitors expected, you already hit on Torrey Davis. Probably gonna have to move it just with his playoff game. I'll let you hit on the 2027 kids because you're more familiar with their recruitments, but certainly some interesting names there too.
Yeah, I'll try to wrap it up quick because there's less going on with these 27 guys. But Julian Caldwell, kid, grew up a big fan of the Longhorns. Grew up going to Texas games. Believe his family had season tickets at one point and still might actually. But pretty contested recruitment. He's taken in-season visits to LSU, Oregon, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, SMU, and he was at the Texas OU game in Fair Park in the second weekend of October. So it'll be a second time seeing the Longhorns this year. First time back in Austin since he camped at the June 1st Elite Camp. And, I brought it up earlier. He's playing a playoff game in West Texas Friday night with the kickoff time of 7 or 7:30. And the family has already mapped it out where they're still going to be able to make it to the Texas-Arkansas game at 2:30 on Saturday. So kind of shows you what he's got between the ears. And I bring that up because he camped at that elite camp on June 1st and had held his offer for 2 months by then. And he still showed up and worked out. I think he was the only kid that did that, or one of only like 2 or 3 that did that. So tremendous mental eval, tremendous player. He's had a great junior season. He averaged like 24.6 yards per catch as a sophomore. Field stretcher, sub-11 guy. As a junior, he's getting a lot more targets. He's producing a lot more. So his yards per catch has gone down to like 18.9, but that's still ridiculous. And he has in 11 games, 65 catches for 1,224 yards and 14 touchdowns. So, almost a fourth of his catches are turned into scores, which is unreal.
65 catches for 122 yards would be like the most outrageous stat.
The Jack Injury stat line. That's what it feels like. Like, why does every time Jack Andrews touch the ball, he turns and just gets like smoked instantly? They need to scheme him better.
Playing tight end like I used to play tight end.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of tight ends, Brock Williams out of Libertyville, Illinois. He's the nation's number 2 ranked tight end in 2027. He is the top 3 of Georgia, Ohio State, and Texas. Texas is definitely the dark horse of those two. This is a kid who's been to Ohio State like half a dozen times. He's been to Georgia 2 or 3 times. He took in-season visits to Ohio State for the Texas game, so it'll be his second time seeing the Longhorns play this year. He also was at Ohio State last week for their big win over UCLA, and he was in Athens for Georgia's big win over Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin earlier in the year. But this trip to Austin will be his first time ever visiting Texas, and he intends to commit in the first week of December. So Texas will probably be the last to host him, but, unless they have like the best visit of all time, he's not going to Texas. So, maybe it's a long-term play. Not sure. Again, I think they're behind in this one, and he's gone as far as saying Ohio State's the leader at different times this season. That's where I expect him to end up. But, hey, you don't know if you don't shoot your shot. Texas, they're going to shoot their shot this weekend. I got 3 other names. Carter Jones out of Pequasin, Virginia. I don't know. He's out of Virginia. Top 247 offensive tackle. This visit's been on the book since like August or September. Texas actually has not offered him. I expect that to change this weekend. He's had a national schedule this season. He's taken unofficials to Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, Virginia, Penn State, LSU, and Tennessee. Texas, the next, top tier blue blood program on the schedule. And like I said, I would expect an offer to come about this way. Another thing, too, I think is interesting. There's like 6 in-state top 247 O linemen in 2027. Like, if Kyle Flood in Texas are working this hard to get out-of-state O linemen to campus, it means they value them extremely high. Because, again, there are like half a dozen in-state O linemen in the top 247. Speaking of top 247 O linemen, Reed Ramsey, a guard projection, IOL projection, recently put out a top 5 of Alabama, Georgia, Miami, Ohio State, and Texas. He's gone on record saying Alabama and Ohio State are the ones at the front of the race for him. Doesn't have a commitment timeline quite yet, but, we'll be in Austin this weekend. Second visit to Austin, I believe. He camped at the June 1st Elite Camp where he picked up his offer, so it'll be a return trip. And is very much a priority prospect for the Longhorns. They've only offered like 3 kids with an IOL projection, and him and Peyton Miller out of Ann are without doubt, the best ones there. So yeah, some ground to make up again with, Bama and Ohio State leading the charge. I had Carlos May on our story for 10 most important visitors. He's a D lineman out of Mississippi. He is not going to be able to make it in. So I'll talk about Noah Roberts, who is a maybe. He's the top 247 running back out of the state of Arizona, the highest rated running back the state of Arizona has produced since that Bijan Robinson guy a few years ago. So that's pretty notable. Ohio State, Oregon, USC, Texas, and Arizona State are kind of the schools in the mix for him. Bama's in there at some point too, but I think they're kind of out of it a little bit. And I mean, yeah, it is a maybe. And then you brought up Richard Anderson.
Yeah, we needed to mention those guys one more time.
Yeah.
Richard Anderson, you went into his recruit or his eval. I mean, and maybe, you can probably circle the offensive line as maybe the biggest priority down the stretch, but I mean, getting a guy like Richard Anderson is probably pretty high on the list of what Texas wants to do in terms of flipping him. LSU commit, same story. Only has officially visited LSU. Now, what's curious about this weekend is I've been told he's coming in with Hayward Howard, the Texas cornerback commit. So does that mean he's an official visitor, or is he, just tagging along with Hayward? Does he want to come back for an official next weekend for A&M? I guess we'll see. Biggest note is he is planning on coming, so that's important for Texas. To try to get
Like I brought it up when we still had him at 64, that if he ended up at Texas, he's the best D lineman they've signed of the Sark era. And now he's ranked higher than any D lineman they've signed in the Sark era. Tremendous prospect, would play year 1 at Texas, contribute year 1 at Texas. And, like you said, D-line's not the biggest need. But if you're going best player available and are going to drop the bag right before signing day like Texas did with Justice Terry, Richard Anderson is the guy to do it for.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously, we have not confirmed a date yet, but as Brian Doan reported, Zion Ely, freak edge rusher, committed to Maryland. And what's notable about that is Maryland just gave a vote of confidence to Mike Loxley as their head coach, and they're going to give him more financial resources for NIL. And obviously Maryland's got the Under Armour Connect. So there's a lot of money going into Maryland. They have the Malik Washington that looked like they're on an upward trajectory. And they have a commitment from Zion Ely. Have heard his NIL package is in, multiple millions of dollars, not just, million. It's
like
line to get some good money.
It's like 5 to 6 across 3, I believe.
Yeah. And so you look at that at Texas and it's like, so, here's my read on it, bring him in, if Texas isn't going to pay him that, that would just probably be, malpractice in terms of, this rev share era and the needs they have, especially in a room where, you're only losing Ethan Burt, maybe Trey Moore, depending on what you consider him. You got some young guys, probably gonna have to pay more to keep Lance Jackson. Like there's going to be guys they have to, up the NIL for this offseason. And so Zion Ely, I'm not sure if that makes a ton of sense, but if you look towards next season, if Maryland underperforms, they decide to move on from Mike Locksley, then you have this, hey, late in the recruiting cycle last year, we brought you in. We still want you. Maybe he's at a discounted rate at that point. I don't know.
Well,
But maybe it's a futures play.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and even if not, even if he is on a discounted rate, like you have to think about why it doesn't make sense for Texas to get him in the high school recruiting class. Colin Simmons is a seven-figure player. Lance Jackson is a seven-figure player. Richard Wesley is a seven-figure player. They're going to have 3 edge rushers in the room next year making 7 figures. If it's Ely, that's 4. It is not smart to budget that much to one room, regardless of the positional value of them being edge rushers. But hey, Colin Simmons, he's a 3-year player. He's done after next season. If Ely's in the portal and Locksley gets fired, that's when the math makes sense, like you brought up. And, as much as I criticize the Texas recruiting operation for leaving meat on the bone, this is a very smart long-term play by them, and I want to give them a lot of credit for it. Because it was completely out of the blue when, he first popped in that ESPN story that Texas is trying to get him on campus and whatnot. But, yeah, and last thing, Aiden Hall, he's a LSU safety commit in the top 247 at Edna Carr. We are hearing he is not visiting Texas this weekend. They like some other guys more. Maybe that changes since Teray Davis, not coming this weekend. And if they win, he might not be able to make it next week for the A&M game. So maybe it changes with Aiden Hall, but right now we're not expecting him in this weekend. And, yeah, anything else we want to hit on?
That's it. No, we'll be back next week. Should have. I would be surprised if we didn't have some new commitments to talk about. From these local guys, maybe Caden sure takes some time. But I think Texas can use this as a springboard. If they can get past Arkansas, that they can get some positive momentum rolling into Thanksgiving week and maybe upset Texas A&M. We'll see. Still would be shocked if they backdoored into the playoff, but crazier things have happened in college football. I know Bama was a 3-loss team last year going into playoff selection Sunday, and there was an argument to be made, them or SMU. So, we'll see what happens. But I think the biggest thing is Texas has a big, obviously get the win, get some recruiting momentum going. They don't really have any of it right now with, other schools having success the last few weeks. So, with 2 weeks to go till signing day, it's important to get it rolling.
Yeah, and hey, missing the playoffs, especially after the expectations for this team were in preseason, that part sucks, no doubt. But hey, if you're in the Cheez-It Bowl or the Texas Bowl, it makes it a lot easier to recruit in the portal, do the portal things you got to do, T-wording, than it is if you're in the college football playoffs. So at least that is the bright side of not making the CFP because, hey, Texas needs a lot of help in the portal. So,
yeah,
there you go.
Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, that's all we have. Thanks for listening. If you're listening to this video will be available on YouTube on Friday on the Horns 247 page, but obviously you can listen to it where you get your podcasts today. But thanks. Appreciate you all listening, and we'll see you again next week.
Y'all have a great one.